Righty then. So I am literally minutes away from having just watched the Borderlands movie. It was a lovely theatre experience. I had a whole row to myself. And if you're thinking that sounds like a bad omen, yeah, this movie's very bad. Shock, surprise, I know. But, okay. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's mostly just really boring. It's not bad in a fun way, because being bad in a fun way would be thematically relevant for Borderlands. It's just bad in a boring way where the jokes don't land, the characters are flat, the villains are boring, the motivations or whatever. It's just not a very entertaining movie to watch unfold. I think when this goes to streaming, which is probably going to be quite soon, this movie's going to be a bit of a video essay feeding ground. There's a lot of really simple mistakes this movie makes in terms of filmmaking that are going to be interesting to hear people talk about. That's the most credit I can give to this movie. There's no reason to give a plot overview. The plot doesn't matter. It's sort of Borderlands, as in the first game, but not really. They're hunting for a vault, right? That's the plot of the movie. Why? Just because. Because they're good guys and they don't want the bad guys to get it. That's like, they literally say that out loud. They're like, we have morality. When the bad guys, they don't have morality, so we're going to open it so that they can't open it. And the movie barely even builds up what's supposed to be in the vault. Like, okay, you go to the first game. Everyone thinks that in the vault is going to be some sort of ultimate power that they can use to control the galaxy. Turns out it's a giant space squid. But everyone thinks there's something super powerful in there. So that's why they're all trying to get it. In this movie, they're just like, oh, something will be in it probably. It's a vault. They probably had something cool in it. But no one has any guesses. There's not any rumors about what's supposed to be in it. It's just like, yeah, something cool. That's really going to drive the movie forward. And part of the movie is built on a twist. We get some opening narration from Cate Blanchett, who's saying some stuff about how only a daughter of Iridia can open the vault. And you, watching the movie, without having ever even played the games, are like, okay, Lilith, Cate Blanchett, is the main character of the movie, so she's probably going to be this daughter of Iridia. Duh. But for like most of the movie, they're like, no, it's Tina, which doesn't make any sense. But we're supposed to believe that, even though if you've played the games, it's obviously going to be Lilith, because that's her whole deal, she has magic powers. But even if you've never played the games, just the framing of the movie makes it extremely obvious that Lilith is going to be the magical daughter. So why even bother making it a twist in the first place? And let's talk about Cate Blanchett. Obviously, I don't have a bad word to say about Cate Blanchett. She seems like she had fun making this, for what it's worth. But this role, and just the way it's executed in the movie, was so clearly written for someone half her age. And there's nothing wrong with like her being older, but a big part of it is learning about her past and her mother, and Tanis is supposedly raised her, even though they're like, 15 years apart in age? It feels wrong. It should be someone younger than she is. Which also, it changes the vibe of the movie a lot, because gives this sort of old veteran vibe to it, which is not what the movie needs. The movie needs someone young and out of their depth in this role, not someone who's an expert and is basically never worried. And that's let's go through our main cast, because that's one of the biggest problems with the movie, is forgetting for a second that whatever these characters are supposed to be in the games, and we'll get to that, most of them are just boring. They're just, fairly typical. I don't even know how to put, not so much typical, just normal people with maybe a little quirk or two. We've got Lilith, and she's this bounty hunter, and she's very serious and doesn't want to be here, and she's given that sort of gruff attitude, right? We've got Roland, and he's this tough mercenary type. He doesn't really want to be there, and he's given this gruff professional soldier type vibe. So already the two of them basically have the same personality, which is redundant in a cast. You don't have the two super professionals. You either have one of them be silly or one of them be bad at it. But no, they're both extremely competent, extremely good at their jobs, both desperately, expertly focused on what they're supposed to be doing. And why bother? Why have two of them? Okay, so then we've got Tina, and she's just kind of a normal kid who sometimes throws blow-up bombs. She's not super extreme, severe or anything. She's a pretty regular sort of kid who maybe does a few quirky things sometimes, but she's nothing like Tina in the games, right? She's just a kid. She's the kid on the team. We have Tanis, Jamie Lee Curtis, who is supposed to be the sort of quirky scientist, but she's not that quirky. They kind of hint at, like, maybe a sort of, like, autism thing where she doesn't pick up on emotions or something like that, but they don't lean into it very much, and by the end she basically just becomes, like, the kind grandma of the team, is the best way to put it. She's just there to be exposition lady who can explain what's going on to the audience. And then finally we have Krieg, who's supposed to be the crazy one, but he's not that crazy though. He basically is like a dog who just says weird stuff sometimes, but then is otherwise completely loyal and does everything that everyone ever wants him to. So he's not even that crazy. He just doesn't say the right words sometimes, which defies the point. And also, how could I forget Claptrap? Of course, Claptrap, Jack Black, who is there to be the funny one, which is strange that in a Borderlands movie, you would only have one character there to be the funny one. Shouldn't they all be the funny one? Yeah, most of his jokes revolve around slapstick of people shooting him or him pooping out bullets. That one was in the trailer and it's just as funny in the movie in context, let me tell you. And just, he does a lot of like, wow, that just happened kind of humor, which is just the weakest, most pointless humor ever. And like, you can get away with that in a Borderlands game, but a Borderlands movie, but you need to do more. Because that's the thing about this being a Borderlands movie. It doesn't really feel like a Borderlands movie. The aesthetic is just whatever. It's just like, we'll go out into the desert and put some shit in the frame. They didn't really think it through. They call out a bunch of names from locations in the games, but the locations don't have anything to do with what they are in the games, because the ones in the games are visually interesting. I think the absolute criminal one for this is the Caustic Caverns, which is one of my favourite locations in Borderlands 2. It's this massive chasm with this old rusted mining equipment and these green seas everywhere. It's super cool and visually interesting. And in this movie, it's just some corridors with some green sludge on the floor. It's so disappointing. It's in the trailers. This is the Caustic Caverns. These two are supposed to be the same place. I mean, they're not. This is like an alternate universe or whatever, but why even call it that if it's not even a freaking cavern? It's just a tunnel. That's not a cavern. And the action, because you would think this would be the easiest part to pull off, is the action. But let me show you what all of the action in this movie looks like. It's Cate Blanchett and she goes, and that's it. She just shoots people, which it's Borderlands. The whole point is that every character has these special abilities that make them unique, but everyone is just like pew 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 pew. Why are they not using special abilities that are relevant to each of their characters? Why doesn't Roland pull out his turret? Why did you not give Lilith her magic powers till the end of the movie? Spoilers, that's what's in the vault, is her magic powers. And you're like, wow, she's become a superhero now. I'm very invested now. There's a lot about this movie that makes me think it was pretty heavily changed up in editing. The movie opens with narration, which is often a sign that there's been reshoots, and because it's a good way to quickly blank over what's supposed to be happening in a scene. So we open with narration of Lilith. When she first arrives on Pandora, we get some more narration from Lilith, like sort of Blade Runner style, like, oh, I was hunting down this kid on this case, and I asked these locals, and and I did this and I did that, and it's just showing us what she did, and it's like, okay, originally this was going to be a full scene in the movie, but they just cut it down for time. But then the narration just stops happening, which just draws more attention to the fact that that's what the narration was for. It's not a running thing through the whole movie, it just stops about 15 minutes in. They just stop doing narration, which is silly. It's just silly. The villains are boring, extremely boring, and barely make any sense at all. It's Mr. Atlas Man, and he's evil. That's all you need to know about him, is he's a bad guy. And he has Commander Knox with him, and she's evil too, until she isn't, and then she gets vaporized, and you're like, wow, I guess that just happened. But, Claptrap doesn't say that, that's the one time he should say that, because it made no fucking sense in the movie. She was just like, this entire time she's been on Team Child Murder, and then when they finally get to murder the child, she's like, no, I'm not on Team Child Murder anymore. I'm going to stand down and stand with the good guys. And then she gets vaporized. And you're like, well, you were a worthwhile character, Commander Knox. I'll tell you what, there was one particular moment in the movie that got a laugh from me, or, like a light chuckle. It wasn't supposed to be funny, but I thought it was funny, which is they've come to this quarry or something, this abandoned quarry, where the vault is supposed to be. And they're like, we can't find it, it's supposed to be here. And Krieg just looks under a metal grate, and he sees something glowing, and he's like, oh, that's the vault. And they just find it. It's just under a metal grate in this quarry. How did no one making this quarry, when this quarry was assumedly a working quarry, never notice on the ground? Just like, it's not buried or anything. It's just like someone put a grate over it because I guess it was a tripping hazard, this ancient piece of technology. It's so like they didn't even try. And that's the whole movie. It feels like they just weren't even trying to make it all that interesting. They didn't borrow any of the interesting parts of the games. They didn't borrow any of the annoying parts of the games. It's just a really generic, boring action movie. Which, why bother? There's two solutions. Well, the third solution is don't make the movie, which was my suggestion from the beginning. But your two solutions, you're forced to make a Borderlands movie. What do? One, most obvious thing ever, make it animated. It gives you so many more options. You can incorporate the art style of the games. That just make an animated movie. It fits way better. But two is to absolutely fill it with comedians, with really charismatic comedians. If you do this movie and just stick the cast of Arrested Development in it, then you've got something. But we've got Kevin Hart here, and whether you enjoy his humor or not, he is a comedian. But in this, he's a straight man. Why even bother? You may as well replace him with generic action man number 17. It's entirely worthless. The only comedian there doing jokes is Jack Black, and he's stuck as a little annoying robot where the joke is that he's annoying. So that's not great. You need a super, super charismatic character in there who can just vamp through every scene and just be constantly making jokes, and so that even if the movie doesn't make sense, at least this character is funny. This is not just because I just saw Deadpool last week, but you need a Ryan Reynolds in there to liven things up. Screw it, you're not going to get another one of these. Put Handsome Jack in the movie and have him just vamping through the whole movie and taunting the heroes, because at least that would be something. Or you have to be really, really clever with it, because a lot of the later Borderlands games are semi-parodies of video games, so you should make the movie incorporate some of that parody of movies. It should be more you can do the cliches, but then you have to draw attention to the fact that you're doing the cliches, and you have to be smug about it and be clever, and that would be annoying, but at least that would make it feel more like Borderlands. But this is just it's a slightly weird university living, but not that weird. It's not as weird as the games are. There's some weirdos out in the wasteland who wear masks, I guess, and Moxie's there, and she runs a bar, but she's not super flirty like Moxie is in the games, so why even bother? Tell you what, there's one, the best character in the movie, and he's barely in it, is Benjamin Byron Davis as Marcus. He freaking nailed it. He's perfect. Every time he was on screen, I was like, that's Marcus. And he's barely in the movie. Why bother? Honestly, that's my feeling of the whole movie is why bother? I don't think this is going to make much money considering how empty my theatre was. It's just a bad, generic movie, and I'm not going to pretend to be like super upset about this because I didn't want this movie to exist in the first place. I am reveling in the fact that it's terrible, quite frankly. But yeah, don't if you're wondering, don't go and see it. It's not fun to watch. It's not funny bad. It's just boring. If you desperately want to see it, wait for 2 weeks until it gets shoved onto streaming and forgotten about. Yeah, it's bad. Thank you very much for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here or just support the things I do, then please consider signing up. It would mean a lot to me, as well as a like, a comment, a share, a subscribe, and a bell ringing. If you want to hear me have actual thought-out opinions on Borderlands, and a couple of years ago I did go through all of the Borderlands games up here, I still think those are, decent, maybe not up to my current standard, but, they're fine, they're okay. And for something different, what should we do this week? Oh, I never think what to put in these. YouTube will decide.